All right.
Gun rights are a national topic of discussion right now, and the media has presented the Second Amendment as being in jeopardy. What are your thoughts on Oklahoma's constitutional carry law, and do you think our right to bear arms is in jeopardy?
I agree 100% with Mike.
That's a lie. That's his first lie. He doesn't agree with Mike Wilkerson 100% about anything, especially about guns, as you're getting ready to see.
You know, the joy of Facebook has portrayed me as being anti-gun. Well, you know, Facebook is always true, right? What I said during an OK2A rally was that I disagreed with some of the things that Don Spencer said that day.
So Tracy doesn't like some of the things. Of course, he doesn't like any of the things that Spencer does, but he says some of this mysterious statement that, you know, he doesn't like some of the things. He got a lot of heat for it. So now he picks one thing to say that he disagrees with, to explain it. And strangely enough, it's the one example that Sheriff Candidate Mike Wilkerson used to justify his belief in what Shaw believes the exact opposite of.
Particularly that he was supporting the right to carry a loaded rifle in your vehicle. I don't believe that there's a safety instructor out there that would agree that carrying a loaded rifle in your car is safe.
Remember, Mr. Shaw is not from here. Obviously, he doesn't act like us, look like us, think like us, talk like us. When he says things like, he doesn't know a single firearms instructor who thinks it's safe to carry a loaded rifle in your car, that's the opposite of what almost any of us here would say, that we don't know one firearms instructor, except for Matt North, apparently, who doesn't think that it's safe to carry a loaded weapon in your car. But since Mr. Shaw says he doesn't, I'll tell him one. Dean Bridges. Dean wrote the foreword to my book. Dean is my closest friend after my brother Lance. I talk to him about weekly on the phone. We spoke for 2 hours after I sent him a clip of the gun debate question. Dean is the proprietor of Team Phoenix Instructions, which instructs people in personal and physical security. And he does it himself. He just got back from Colorado last week from doing a bodyguard mission out there. Part of what Dean teaches in Team Phoenix Instructions is Israeli combat shooting. He's certified to instruct in both Israeli combat pistol and Israeli combat rifle. He teaches 3 classes in pistol, 1 in rifle, and each one of those classes is recognized by CLEET, which is the Council on Law Enforcement Education and Training, the governing body that certifies all of the education for police officers in the state of Oklahoma, for 8 hours. I guarantee that Dean had forgotten more about firearms before he even knew what an Israeli was than this puss, Tracy Shaw, has yet to figure out about firearms. And he thinks it's safe to carry a loaded weapon in your vehicle if you're a safe person, just like anything else. Jay Calan in Ottawa County, he was a cowboy in the Dakotas, a real cowboy, where they ride for days and days, driving cattle without seeing any barbed wire, that type of stuff. And after he did that, he moved to San Bernardino, California, where he retired as a cop from Jay. And he thinks that it's okay, that it's safe. In fact, it's smart to carry a loaded weapon in your car. And the sheriff of Ottawa County, he's a patriot named Jeremy Floyd. I asked him after hearing that stupid comment. I knew what the answer was, but he said, of course, it's a good idea to carry a loaded weapon in your car. And finally, if you look down next to you, Mr. Shaw, the guy that has been in law enforcement since almost as long as you've been alive, he thinks it's okay. He just said he did. Gary Dill is a man that Dean Bridges introduced me to. Gary Dill has been a special agent on 3 federal agencies and for the OSBI. He's been a police chief. He's one of the original students of Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do. He's been teaching combative courses since I've been alive. He thinks it's a good idea to have a loaded weapon in your car. So this is just another case where Tracy Shaw is showing how totally out of touch he is with his environment, the people that he wants to be a sheriff over.
We don't do that in the military.
I guess Shaw believes that no veterans are going to be watching his debate. Either that or he thinks that we're idiots. Because in the military, we do carry loaded weapons in our vehicles. And I've tried to figure out what he could possibly mean by that wasn't a lie. And the first thing I thought of is maybe whenever Shaw was a military police in the Air Force, that his supervisor thought he was such a dumbass he didn't allow Shaw to keep a loaded magazine in his weapon. I don't know. I'll tell you that in the Air Force, military police are treated so special because it's such an important job. The air bases are the most secure bases in the country, which means in the world, that, for instance, in the mess halls in the Air Force, the military police have their own section where they go sit. It's partitioned off, and they have racks there for their M16 rifles. The security police carry rifles around that are loaded. They go up there, they put their M16 in with, you see the magazines are loaded. They sit down with their sidearms that are loaded too. I just don't know what this guy's talking about. Since he said military, not Air Force, I'll tell you about my experience. I'm retired. I was in the Army. I was in the regular Army. I was in the Oklahoma National Guard. I was in the Reserves, and I was in the Florida National Guard. I had more jobs, more military occupations than over 99% of veterans. The point that I'm making is it's a really wide range of different military occupations that I had, yet in all of them, rear echelon or not, no, we carried loaded weapons in our vehicles on real world missions. But I'll tell you what I did. I was, of course, military police. I was civil affairs specialist. I was a watercraft operator, deckhand on an ocean-going vessel in the Army. I was a transportation manager. The last thing I did was a mechanic. When I was in the Oklahoma National Guard, I was in the infantry with Dean Bridges. And before that, I was in the reserve unit in the Special Forces in Tulsa. But I've had a lot of different military occupations. Every occupation I've ever been in, when we were on a real world mission, that means not out training somewhere, we carried loaded weapons on our persons in our vehicles. Like I said, I just don't know what he meant by that, other than if he was an idiot and he wasn't allowed to carry loaded weapons when he was in the military. Obviously, he wasn't in combat, or because in a combat zone, not surprisingly, you carry a loaded weapon in your vehicle.
We don't do that in law enforcement.
This is either an idiotic lie or just idiotic, but either way, he's being disingenuous to his audience. Now, pay attention to what he's saying, because he's flipping back and forth between loaded rifles and loaded firearms, which would include sidearms, pistols, revolvers, whatever. But at any rate, he doesn't believe that you and I, people who are not currently cops, have the right to have either one loaded in our vehicle. He makes that clear in the debate. Okay, but as far as cops not having a loaded rifle in their cars, again, he's BSing us. This is another very strange thing for this very strange man to say. And it is the most telling of everything he said during the debate that shows how little he understands about law enforcement. Earlier I said he was military, police, and the Air Force. I don't know that he was. Dean Bridges had a hard time believing he was military. Thought I must have been mistaken until he saw the video. And then Dean was convinced he was not in the military, police, and the Air Force. I don't know. But law enforcement do carry loaded rifles and shotguns in their cruisers. Dean told me that when he was a canine officer, he carried a loaded rifle and a loaded shotgun in his cruiser, that there was an actual status name for that. It was cruiser safe. And he told me to ask David Sargent. David Sargent instructed Dean Bridges in law enforcement firearms training. David Sargent is federally trained in firearms. It's called Fletchy certification for the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. The Bureau of Indian Affairs sent David there. David turned out to be a super cop. A lot of you remember David from growing up in Afton. His dad was a coach when my father was superintendent there for 8 years. But the point is that cops do carry loaded rifles and loaded shotguns in their vehicles. But because Tracy Shaw doesn't want you and me to carry loaded rifles and shotguns in our vehicles, he lies about it. Or he's just too stupid to know the difference.
And as far as I know, the only people I've ever known that carry loaded rifles have one purpose in mind, and that's to shoot from the vehicle, whether that be an animal or a person.
First of all, note how the contempt that Tracy Shaw has for the laws that we have in our state here in Oklahoma. Oklahoma recognizes by statute the right of a citizen to carry loaded firearms in their vehicle. So that's the first thing, is the contempt that he has for those laws. And before I go on, just let me point out that when a sheriff has contempt for laws, then he doesn't obey them. As in my case, when I shot a convicted felon, drug dealer, felon, burglar, felon, thief in Arkansas with 2 active warrants for his arrest for poaching and drunk driving in Missouri, it doesn't matter if he was an informant or not, which he was. Sheriff Harlan Moore still would have sent Gail Wells out to frame me for attempted murder at any rate, because they don't like citizens defending themselves with firearms or arresting people, even though Oklahoma says we have that right. I'm not the only person who's been arrested for using a firearm in self-defense in Delaware County under this administration. There's a woman in my book who is the chair for a national veterans organization, the Women's Auxiliary for the VFW, whose daughter was divorcing her idiot son-in-law, and the son-in-law pinned the daughter against her vehicle with his tractor. She was on the outside. He had her pinned up. And so this lady pulled her firearm to get her son-in-law to stop. This lady was arrested. And like I said, this woman's not some strung out doper or junkie or some crazy person. She's a middle-aged, professional, educated good looking, normal, middle-aged Okie. She could be any one of ours wives or mothers. And that lady and I are not the only two who Harlan Moore had arrested for using a firearm in self-defense. And if you elect another city boy like Harlan Moore, it's going to happen again. And once again, I'll be the only one to report the real victim's side of the story. I'm telling you, it's going to happen. It's going to get bad. You elect Tracy Shaw or any other anti-gunner for sheriff, and they don't respect the laws we have in place to use our firearms. It's going to come back to you. Mark my words. The crime rate is going to keep going up, and the citizens' ability to defend themselves against these criminals is going to keep going down. And a lot of you Yankees who have elected Harlan Moore and all the city boys like him that are running our government here are starting to feel the effects of this crime. You better think about what you're doing before you cast your vote for another outsider city boy. I'm telling you. But moving on, would there be a legitimate purpose for a man to want to shoot from the vehicle, whether it be at an animal or a person? Yes, there is. Chief Wilkerson just gave you a legitimate reason for shooting both people and animals. Country people have wild dogs that kill their cattle. And where I live, we have wild boars that will attack you in your vehicle. Mr. Wilkerson gave the example of country people taking lots of money to the bank and needing to protect it in case they were robbed. Carjacking. Now, but Tracy Shaw is not from the country. Just another stupid comment from a stupid city boy. How's this for a scenario? You're working the late shift and your wife is at home with your young child, and your child gets violently sick. She has to take him to the ER. Okay, so en route or on the way back, whatever. Let's say it's at night. Her vehicle breaks down, and she calls a tow service, or she calls you, or she's waiting on a dark, desolate road, and here come a couple of bad guys. Say like Philpott, the guy that I shot, a violent felon who beats up women and children. Okay, do you want her sitting there in the dark, fumbling around with rounds to put in her revolver, or looking for the magazine because it's not in there? No, of course you don't. This guy, Tracy Shaw, doesn't care, obviously. He'd rather give the benefit of the situation to the criminals. I guarantee that Stevie Barrett and the other two turds in that pickup wish that they would have had a loaded firearm when I stuck mine in Stevie's face through the window of his pickup when I was making a lawful arrest. The point here is that violence happens, and the citizenry in Oklahoma have a right that's been recognized in our statutes to self-defense and to have weapons and to have ammunition in your weapon, in your car, and to do something about it, to protect yourself. And Tracy Shaw at North Pole don't like that.
I don't disagree with open carry or your constitutional right to have a firearm in any manner.
Okay, here's another lie that he just said. He says he doesn't disagree with our rights to own a weapon in any manner, but he just got through saying unless it's in your vehicle loaded. So that is, he does disagree with our right to have a weapon in at least that manner. He just lied. He lies and he lies and he lies and he tries to cover it up because he knows that we don't think like him. He's not from here. He's anti-gun. And then he closes it off with reaffirming that he disagrees with Don Spencer on lots of things.
But there are certain laws that are in place to protect you and I. And I do disagree with some of the things that Don Spencer does.
You know, I've never heard a man whine like that. He has manicured fingernails. They've never been dirty. He's never been outside. He doesn't know anything about wild animals or wild people or anything else. He's just a feminine, despicable puss of a man who whines like a girl who would be a great embarrassment to represent us as a sheriff, as the highest lawman in the county.
Well, I can't buy liquor burgers, we make speed. We came out there, we grow weed. We do our best to avoid the law in the dry counties of Arkansas.